Good evening, everyone. If you could all please, or those that would like to help lead songs tonight can come right on up. And if you could all please stand, we'll start with number 67, Still My Soul Be Still.
Change may rage tomorrow. God is at your side. No longer dread the fires of unexpected sorrow. God, you are my God, and I will trust in you and not be shaken. Spirit within me to rest in you Still, my soul be still, I will be moved by lesser lights and shadows. Hold onto his wings with shield of faith against temptation's flaming arrows. God, you are my God, and I will trust in you and not be shaken. Lord, steadfast spirit within me to rest in you Still, my soul be still, do not forsake the truth you learned in the beginning. Wait upon the Lord, and hope will rise as stars appear when day is dimming. God, you are God, and I will trust in you and not be shaken. Steadfast spirit within me to rest in you alone.
You may be seated, and we'll turn to our next song, 112, Complete Me.
Sanctified, salvation wrought, thy blood hath bought and bought for me, and glorified I too shall be. Complete in thee, I died to sin, thy grace hath conquered reign within. My voice shall bid the time sanctify salvation wrought. Thy blood hath bought and bought for me, and glorified I too shall be. Complete in thee, each need supplied, and no good thing to me denied. Since thou my portion, Lord, will be, I want no more. Complete in thee, ye justified, O blessed God, and sanctified, salvation wrought. Thy blood hath bought and bought for me, and glorified I too shall be. Tuesday the wind before thy bar, all tribes and tongues assembled are. Among thy chosen will I be, at thy right hand, complete in thee. Be justified, O blessed God, and sanctified, salvation wrought. Thy blood hath bought and bought for me, and glorified I too shall be.
And if you could all please turn to number 393. Our next song will be Take My Life and Let It Be.
Take my life and let it be, consecrated, Lord, to thee. Take my
if you could all please stand for our last hymn, we'll sing 148, Relentless Love.
Well, I hope you're all able and planning to stick around afterwards tonight for our decorating party. Transform this into more of a Christmas appearing venue, and it is about that time of the year, so as I mentioned this morning, if not, you have no grounds to squabble about the decorations that are put up. So this is your opportunity to participate. So Job chapter 2. You take your Bibles and turn to Job 2 as we continue our study through the book of Job and encounter what ends up being a very difficult situation. We've been in a similar spot on one side or the other of a situation of this nature. Job chapter 2, verse 11. Now when Job's three friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. They raised their voices and wept. They tore their robes, sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. Father, we must first acknowledge and recognize with gratitude that life, though filled with difficult periods of time and difficult situations, the duration of our life, the experiences is not what Job endured. We have so very much to be thankful for in the midst of the things that we do encounter. Not to mention the years of history that have transpired since Job, and the increase of mystery that has been revealed to us, the knowledge that we have of who you are, your presence in our life. Teach us, give us wisdom, help us as we seek to be a comfort to others in difficult situations. May we learn well in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, in recent months, we are all too familiar with the term called gaslighting, and doing something and accusing you of doing the same thing, all the while appearing to be innocent themselves. Doesn't work, but that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of manipulation. We're seeing intentional separation of groups of people from one another. Everyone is made to feel isolated and alone, and the only one straying from the herd. Many still work from home. For some, it's probably a benefit, right? Maybe less distraction, maybe less traffic on the way, less stuff to deal with like that. But there are still, and some perhaps there's economics involved. They had their employees stay at home. They realize that they can set them up at home a whole lot cheaper than they can pay for a large workspace. And so, as long as they're effective, that seems to work for some. The state, by the way, still has mandates for work at home, filtering down through the MSP. They're still not completely back to work entirely, and it's rather interesting. But they're increasing this so that there's less and less interaction with coworkers. You watch the news, which I don't recommend, for reasons of blood pressure and other things. They always give you the impression that you're the strange one. You're the odd one out. Everyone else is over here, and you are the exception, and you're the one that's, you're the one that's keeping us from getting past COVID and getting back to normal. You ever heard that? Great. That direct some of the commercials and information that you hear regardless of who you are, regardless of where you stand on any of the issues or what you've done about it. They're giving you the impression that you're the one that's the problem. Everyone else is on board except for you. You're the only one in the world that feels the way that you do. You listen to the president lately? If you're concerned, don't recommend that either. If you're concerned about the economy, you don't need to be. It's got it all taken care of. If you're concerned, you're the only one. That's your problem. There's no reason for that. Some difficult things to deal with, and we live in a day where if you disagree with the administration, you disagree with health recommendations or orders or school boards on a local level, you're bombarded with messages that give the impression that you and everything that you think, everything that you consider to be realistic, to be sensible, to be normal, to be proper or right, that everything that you think should be called into question. You stand up for sensible education and you speak out at a school board meeting today, and guess what? You're labeled a domestic terrorist. What you've come to know to be true is pushed back at you and in a way that you are told it really isn't true. Everyone else, and I mean everyone else, is caring and thoughtful and open-minded to get on board and come along with everyone else. And you should too. You're the lone holdout in this world. You know that conservative Christians are the hindrance from the rest being able to accomplish their agenda? We know that to be true. One day, the church will be raptured. Spirit removed. Can you imagine what will take place at that point? We're not given a time frame here in the text from where we were last time. Satan had attacked Job in a way. He had taken away everything that he owned, all of his possessions, his family, his herds, his employees, everything. And he still worshiped God. He still gave God the honor that was due to God. And Satan says, most will give anything for their life. Let me touch him physically, and he'll change his tune. And he did. Satan was granted the permission to do whatever to Job, except he could not harm he couldn't take his life. So bad was it, as we cut off in verse 10, and verse 9, his wife finally says, just curse God and die. You'd be better off. I'd be better off. We'd all be better off if you just gave up now and were gone. In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. We're not given a time frame here. We don't know how long he endured this physical agony. I went through some of the descriptions last time we were here of all of the, at least a portion of the references made to his physical condition throughout the book. The descriptions of what it did to his body. As I said, we're not given a time frame. We don't have any idea how long he's endured this, how long since Satan has been attacking his body with these miserable sores and to the point of his skin turning black and deteriorating and deforming his body. And his wife turned on him, wishing that he'd curse God and die. You may feel alone in our world today, and that's the point, actually. They are trying to make you feel alone so that you capitulate and get on board with the agenda that is driven. Job was very much alone. Job was alone and he had nothing. He had nothing. And if you're familiar with the chronological time frame of Job, very, very early, time of the patriarchs, most likely that you understand the fact that social media was a little bit slower back then. It took a little longer to get the word out. But eventually, Job's friends found out that evil had come upon him, as the text says. And they decided to come and visit. How very nice of them. It's one thing to be alone. It's one thing to be isolated. It's one thing to be considered to be the odd one that doesn't go along with everyone else. It's quite another level of cruelty to be attacked by even those that at one point were considered friends. There is a loneliness here, a depth of loneliness that Job would have experienced that would have been a pain and agony equal or beyond the physical agony that he was enduring. I've wondered, is this part of what James refers to when he speaks of the testing of your faith? How many of us ought to be grateful that we have not been tested to that point? They call these three men friends. They perhaps were at one point. They don't prove to be very good friends here. It is assumed, though very little is known about them, it is assumed that they likely would have been equally or similarly wealthy men that Job would have had contact with. They traveled a distance, some of them. Some of the areas listed here are from Edom. And so at some point, through some means, news traveled to these friends that Job was enduring this kind of difficulty, and they decided to come visit it. The text puts it this way: they made an appointment together to come, and the wording seems a little difficult to walk through, but it appears that they had a meeting point. So they met together so that the three of them could come as one group to visit Job together. No indication how they heard the bad news, but as we know, news that's bad seems to travel faster than news that's good. We don't know either what their theological foundations were. We know some of their musings that they share throughout the book, and we find it lacks a good base, but such as they are. Their reaction here gives us a picture, it paints a picture of the depth of Job's agony. First thing we notice is this: they made their appointment to come together to show him sympathy, to comfort him, and when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. The sores, the degrading of the skin, face, had so disfigured him that they did not know it was Job. They thought they were in the right place. They thought they were showing up where Job was supposed to be. But they didn't recognize him. Their response: they saw him from a distance, they didn't recognize him, they raised their voices and wept. That is basically, simply, they wailed. These are wealthy men of renown, stature. Would have been on near, obviously the text tells us early on in chapter 1 that Job was the greatest in the East, but these men would have been likely close rivals. They would have been well off. They lifted their voices and wailed at the sight of Job. They tore their clothes. They put dust on their heads. That's a cultural sign of mourning, of helplessness, of a recognition and inability to fix this situation. They couldn't change it. They couldn't alter it. They couldn't do anything about it. They sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one said a word. No one said a word. By the way, in the culture, 7 days was a complete cycle of mourning. As though Job was dead. It was that bad. Sat there for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one said a word. This, however, was their best moment. These friends, as they may have been, they're referred to that here. They don't prove to be that throughout the rest of the book. This was their best moment. 7 days where they didn't open their mouth. Speechless because of the impact, of the evidence of the suffering of Job. Beyond what they could explain, beyond what they could rationalize, though, later they tried. They failed miserably. The old saying, better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth to remove all doubt. There's a whole lot of truth to that, isn't there? You ever encountered a situation where there just are not words? What do you say? Sometimes you're in a situation where you come up with the right words about 3 days late. There are situations where there just are not words. What do you say? You want to. You want to say something. You want to somehow express concern, but there just aren't words. See the chaplain's manual for the MSP and on death notifications, it says this: avoid cliches. It doesn't say avoid cliches like the plague. You'd think it would say that. That would seem more appropriate to me, but it just says avoid cliches like God allowed this. It will get better. It will be all right. Don't worry, you'll get through this. Well-meaning, well-intended. Not always accurate and usually not helpful. Sometimes just being present, recognizing the pain, feeling humanly unable to do anything about it, unable to say anything profound. Sometimes silence is better than saying something that just doesn't really help. This was their best moment. 7 days of utter silence. Job's friends at their best right there. We do at times encounter situations, circumstances where we struggle to find words. What do you say? Some of you would recognize the name Rihanna. Seen her in some of the videos that I showed from Iraq. She is one of the team leaders for Indigenous Ministries over in Interbeal. And Fadi is her husband, and he does a lot of the logistic stuff. She does a lot of the hands-on work with kids and families, and the trauma in their family. Unspeakable. Some of the hardships that they have endured. You talk about an experience that brings you to silence when they start to share things, and her sister, how her sister was taken, and after a significant period of time and a whole lot of effort on the part of many, they found her and they were able to retrieve her from ISIS, and yet never ever be the same. Their family was fleeing. ISIS was coming down the street, and shells were flying all over, and they're fleeing, and and as a young gal, and bombs went off in a building nearby. The glass from the building came out, and beheaded individual right in front of them. Then they ended up in a refugee camp. By the way, she experienced 2 different times in refugee camps. They got out once, and then there was a resurgence again, and back in a refugee camp again. And they're sharing these things, and some of the others and their stories are far more tragic than that. And what do you say? You want to say something. You think saying something would be better than just sitting there in silence. War vets often keep many of the horrors they've experienced to themselves. They have such a hard time talking about it. They struggle with it. One of the worst things probably that you could say was, I know what you're going through, unless you've been there and done that. Right? These friends would later turn on Job and try to reconcile in their mind what they were seeing in Job. Their mind could not comprehend what they were seeing. They couldn't comprehend the evil. There must be some explanation. And the only explanation that they could come up with was Job was to blame. There's some hidden sin in his life that he's not admitting to, and God is paying him for it. But we already know that's not the case. Job was truly alone. The world against him, everyone against him, the devil against him. His family gone, his wife against him, his friends turn against him. We have information here, thankfully, that Job's friends did not have. We are told that Job is not the cause of the trouble. We know this not because of something that Job had done. It's not his fault. He's not the one to blame. God allowed this to prove that God is worthy of praise no matter what. Whether you have an excess of abundance or whether you have nothing, whether you have great health or whether you have horrible health, doesn't matter. God is worthy of praise. In the end, we find that Job's friends may have caused him more pain and suffering than the loss of everything that he had or the physical discomfort. There are times people go through things that we don't understand. We want to sympathize. We want to express to them some words of caring. But sometimes the words aren't there. There's much that we don't understand. Why would God allow certain people to go through certain things? There's got to be a reason, right? We're reasonable people. We are good, rational thinking people. There's got to be a reason. We can figure this out. And we want an answer to that so badly that we're willing to take a wrong answer as opposed to saying, you know what? God's ways are higher than our ways. They're not like our ways. The ways of God are much higher. Sometimes it's best for us to simply remain silent rather than add to one's misery by unnecessary and incorrect rationale. We don't always have the answers. We don't always have the answers. I've been asked a lot of questions over the years. My favorite response most often is, I don't know, but I can look it up. What do you think I am, a walking encyclopedia? No, I'm not. But if the information's available, I'll do the research, I'll look it up, and I can find an answer for you. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, that God is the God of all comfort, who comforts us in every situation, so that we may be able to comfort others in any situation with the comfort wherewith we have been comforted by God. Simplest, the best thing we can do is offer the assurance, the comfort of the one who truly knows what to do, who truly knows what to say. There's a term in ministry actually called a ministry of presence. Sometimes it's comforting just to be present, just to be there. Not necessarily to have the right words to say, because there aren't. To recognize that there are painful situations beyond our human comprehension. But God is still worthy of praise. God is still worthy of praise. May we learn well from the mistakes of Job's friends. Remain silent where it's best. Speak truth, grace, when the opportunities arise. And not try to rationalize everything that we are not going to understand. Because God is the all-wise God, and we are. Sat with him in the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him. They saw that his suffering was very great. This is as real as it gets. And that was perhaps their best move, to be there. They wanted to help. They wanted to do something. They wanted to say something, but there weren't words to say. Be present. They could have prayed more. That would have helped them a lot. We see that later as we progress through the rest of the study. May we learn to be a godly comfort of trying to rationalize and explain away why things happen. The hand of a God who is way beyond us. Stand with me as we dismiss in prayer this evening. Father, I ask that you would give us tender hearts towards those who are suffering hardship, are going through difficulties. Not with a sense of assuming we have all the answers, not certainly with a sense of arrogance. That we know why this is the way it is, or that we have an explanation that we think is valid. Father, to be a comfort as we ought to be. Give us wisdom and discernment to know when we need to speak kind and gentle and comforting words. Words of truth and assurance with grace. Help us that we might be the loving comfort that others around us need. In Jesus' name.